I often feel like a cabin crew air steward when doing these walkthroughs because it's going over a lot of stuff that a lot of you will be familiar with. However, in the case of Glass Strings, it's a very different library. And although it may have a pair of wings and a pilot up at the front, that pilot being you, with different features, which I'll take you through here today, and also maybe some just points of view from me, a working composer, on the thinking behind it, but also ways in which to get the best out of it. So you may have watched one of these before. It's well worth watching in the case of Glass Strings because it is a very different library, personified not least by the preset that it loads up with, Freebo, where you can really hear each individual player, but also what we're doing with Glass Strings is not creating emotional impact through sheer scale of players. So many of these sample libraries are quite swampy in sound. They sound massive and epic and gothic. With this, it's about the emotion of humanity. So you're hearing the passion, and that's because we don't have dozens, scores of musicians masking the individuality of each player. And I think it's particularly noticeable if you go and play down in the cello viola area, where usually with sample libraries it would sound very muddy, but here you really can hear the individual players. So in this walkthrough, I'm going to basically use the GUI, the general user interface, this thing, as a guide to take you through the functionality of Glass Strings and some of these additional features, not least the glass feature, which is not a gimmick. It is a really powerful tool that isn't available on other sample libraries. Just want to take you through a couple of fundamentals, that being that we've divided the library into three different types of articulation or playing style, and these have subtle differences to how they're operated. Starting with shorts, so there's a bunch of different shorts to choose from. Let's start with staccato. And then loud. You'll see that the attack gets sharper, it feels louder, it's more expressed. Same can be applied to the pizzicato, all the way to the really short spiccatos, which again, with this small group of players, you get a kind of a rawness that you wouldn't get with a larger group of players because it would become very silky sounding. Then we have our longs. These come to life when you use basically your modulation, CC001, which controls timbre, which basically crossfades between different styles of performances, from something soft to more espressivo. So it's not just loud and soft and the timbral change you get from players playing, with increased bow pressure. It's actually to do with the way that they articulate as well. I use the modulation wheel in combination with expression, which is CC11, and which is why we have these two large dials to encourage you to use that. So you'll see. And finally, very unique to Crow Hill, we have these things called gestures. And this is basically a way of creating the effect of an orchestra kind of jamming with you whilst you're composing. So if we load up, say, for example, Beautiful Thing, you'll see suddenly this window appears. And basically, these are mode specific or scale specific. If you don't know about modes, I've done a video linked in the video description down below. There's a little guide to how these things work in the user manual, also linked. And we've also done a blag sheet, which is basically a little reference poster, which has proven very popular. Lots of people have got this up on their walls as a guide to the way that modes work. It's nothing to fear. But basically, this mode in C is designed for all the white notes. Doesn't have to be C major, can be A minor, D Dorian. And if we maybe just listen to one note, sustained. So what these are melodic fragments, not really phrases. They're just one, maybe two notes. And what they're particularly useful for is if you're finding yourself having to sustain for long periods, they can create interest for your listener, but also inspiration for yourself compositionally. So let's have a listen. Maybe we do a full chord. There's a whole bunch of different presets. It's drooling being a particular favourite of mine. So going back to the GUI, these two windows very much are connected. This is your preset menu, great way to get started. Let's go to Selects and say Hollywood Longs. And what you'll see is a bunch of different names coming up here. These are the different articulations. You can switch to Saltasto. Beautiful circular bowing. But also, if you observe these different colours here, they correspond to these different colours here, and you can, on the fly, switch between these different articulations. So these work in a lag mode. So if we go sustain, change to tremolando, no change until you play the next note. Three tremolandi. Create presets of your own and just toggle between presets here. So we've got our Hollywood Gestures, Hollywood Longs, Hollywood Plucks, Bartok Pits, Corlegno, Pizzicato, and then our shorts with the staccato, which is new in this version. Biting stack pont. And these, again, you can key switch between, which can be a lot of fun. And then a selection of our gestures here. Just absolutely stunning. What I think we're missing a little bit of is bass, and you'll notice that's the lowest note of the cellos. If we add in a bass here, we get an octave bass underneath. New function we have, though, if you want to orchestrate the cellos and basses so they're not always playing an octave beneath each other, or you're doing richer parts down in the bottom end here which aren't just octaves, we have the new solo function. So you can actually control the orchestration of the bass separately, not just put it in as a layer. Now, where longs are concerned, there's just one exception within this list, and that is legato. These work slightly differently from the other longs. The first thing you'll notice is they only play one note at a time. That is by design. Now, I've done a dedicated legato video, which is linked in the video description down below, but basically what we've done is we've gone to efforts to create the in-between bits between the notes to join them up. This is really, I think, important for being able to articulate melodies, internal passing phrases, that kind of stuff. The trick to using these, again, I talk about this in greater depth in the tutorial that I've talked about, which is linked below. The trick is to actually join them up by overlapping the notes. It won't work if you don't join them up. You'll basically get a re-trigger of the beginning of the sample. Again, check out that tutorial in the link down below. These are your master tune, master volume, taking you through the different articulation switches here. We have a stereo width control, pulls in the stereo image. Have a mono filter which controls the management of the bottom end. We've also recorded the room tone. One of the problems with sample libraries is when you stop playing, it goes down to digital silence. This is great to have maybe on just one instance of glass strings, and it's just your natural room tone, which will run continuously regardless of whether you're playing or not. It stops that slightly otherworldly nature of digital sampling and the noise reduction that's been involved in removing that so you don't get a noise build-up. So it's just about adding a little bit of reality in there. And then we have the release component, which is important for your longs. It kind of depends on how quickly you're moving around and changing chords. It's subtle, but very helpful when articulating stuff differently. We've got phase reversal there, and we can also switch the left right to right left, which is great if you're wanting to do stuff in what's referred to as an antiphonal style, where maybe you don't have the cellos and basses just on the right, you might want them on the left. And then we have our microphone positions, and for me this is best exemplified with shorts. So let's go spiccato because they're kind of bitey and short. So these power the different signals on and off. You will reduce your voice count if you don't have the mics activated, but the minute you activate them, you create your own mixes, both set and forget, but also live on the fly using automation. So let's have a quick listen to the close mics. Now, these are used very much to add a little bit of definition into the mix. They're not favoured by mix engineers because you're never going to be standing next to each desk all at the same time. Indeed, you're rarely going to be in the position that the conductor is in, which is represented by the wide signal here. So you've still got a bit of direct signal and a sense of the room. And finally, your ambient, which is a truer impression of what you would get as a listener. But the reason we use these different microphone positions is to create surround environments, but also to give you the necessary tools for modern production. When they first started recording orchestras in the early 20th century, they very much wanted to give you the sound of what it's like to be in a concert. We've now created a more of a hybrid version where we can really hear the individual players, really hear them digging in. So it's all about finding a mix that you find satisfactory. So this is just the ambient mics, which are furthest away from the band. Let's try those pizzicatos. Wide. And close. What I'm also going to do is switch on a bit of reverb, absolutely common practice with engineers, and I wouldn't shy away from using loads and loads of reverb. It's funny how I find a lot of users feel there's something like cheating about reverb, or it's like putting a little bit too much sugar in your tea. It's not bad for your health, and I've worked with some of the best mix engineers on the planet, and they use bucket loads of the stuff. Most of the presets are loaded up with the chamber, which is an IR based on the room itself. And then you have different reverb types. Longer. And a longer reflection. And I would usually put it into this position, certainly for longs, maybe reduce the amount on the shorts and the pizzicato. Let's go back to freebowing. They kindly made me one, which is my preferred setting for reverb, reverb length, reflection, and mix, which is splosh. And then a lot of fun to be had with Glisten, which is a octave stepping reverb, which you'll be familiar with, very popular in like Strymon pedals, that kind of stuff. sounds particularly nice with saltasto. Let's go crazy on that. Finally, and this is it's a very technologically advanced tool. I don't quite know how Cam has done it, but basically glass is a means of being able to reduce the amount of fundamental being the loudest frequency, which is the note, if you will. So let's just have a little look at something like sustained, a little bit of hall. Let's take the bass out. Is the fundamental. That's the loudest thing that we hear. Now, the problem that happens with sample libraries, and it's very much similar to the reason we made glass strings with the smaller band. Say you've got 5 players, 10 microphones, 1 hall. The minute you go like this, you've got 10 players, 20 microphones, 2 halls. And what happens is, if there's any characteristics of the band, of the microphones, and of the hall that is, I don't know, a little bit with the microphone where you get a little bump at a certain frequency. What can happen as you start to build up arrangements with maybe 50 different voices is suddenly you get this frequency peaking. Now, one of the ways around this is to EQ, say, often like the high mids can get a bit overwhelming, particularly with strings, but suddenly you'll find things start sounding a bit artificial, a little bit produced, because it's a frequency that you're ducking, as opposed to focusing in on the actual fundamentals of each sample being played. And that's where glass comes in. If we play this note, and let's turn the amount up to full. So this is the amount that it responds to the fundamental. The shape is basically the focus, how much focused into the fundamental it is, or how much it kind of grabs from around it. And gain will both boost and reduce the fundamental. So the lower the shape, the more generalized. But this isn't EQ. If you listen to it's a completely different frequency to. So what I'm going to do is just hit sustain, and you'll see that it works very differently from an EQ by just doing a chord. And obviously, when used in extremis, it does have a more produced synthetic quality to it. But if you're struggling with a mix, if you're struggling to hear everything, if it becomes unpleasant to listen to on the ears, I would advise maybe investigating glass as a means of counteracting just a byproduct of sampling, is that every time you hit a note, you are duplicating the environment, the players, the microphones, the hall. I wanted to end with a surprise, and that is that we've released a no bars to entry string library that is basically a tenor, and it gives you the fundamentals of what you need to do string music. Interesting thing about this library, to give it a broad appeal, we recorded it with a big band of players. And I had a go at mixing glass strings, which is a small group of players, again, these individualistic approach to every single note that they play, coupled with this thicker and in many respects richer sounding library called pocket strings. And the results are incredibly complementary, both recorded in the same room, same kind of players, the same culture that you get up here in Scotland. So they blend effortlessly, but it gives you just that one more aperture switch that you can engage when using glass strings. And the results are pretty amazing. So I've got these on separate tracks up here. We've got free bow here and the longs here. Let's just remind ourselves of what pocket strings sounds like. Lovely. Let's just get that nice hall sound up. Beautiful. It has that richness. Now this is what I was talking about earlier. Thicker harmonies down here. Have a slightly less defined quality compared to but combine the two. Beautiful, silky, cinematic. Now I'm going to gradually introduce glass strings and I'm going to try and play exactly the same thing. And it really alters the emotional effect of what I've just played. It takes it from less reflective to definitely more emotive. A little bit of anger, a bit of angst, a bit of, dare I say it, tears, snot. Bring in the glass. Conversely, with the shorts that we have on pocket strings, again, they have that kind of silky sound. It has an impact, but kind of with a limit. I think the minute you introduce a more human sound is the minute you kind of just take it above and beyond the kind of scores that you hear a lot of on telly, which are largely made with bigger, broader sounding sample libraries. So can I do this? And again, the thing about orchestral programming is it's all about nuance and contrast. And by having all of these different levers that you can push, there's all sorts of really subtle stuff that you can do, particularly if you're like me, a media composer working to picture, where you don't necessarily want to distract your audience with changes of subject or modulations within your music. And finally, something I find really useful with pocket strings is going the other way, which is if we were to have a look at the pizzicato here, great, detailed, realistic, human. But if you just want to go a little bit wider screen, so it's a delight to be able to show you not only the new and improved glass strings, share some thoughts of why I think it's an important alternative for us media composers, using the power of expression, not scale, in order to get your emotional content across. So it's great to take through that, but it's an absolute delight to see this new lovely partnership that you can form with Glass Strings and Pocket Strings, which is a tenor and has some amazing synth sounds in as well. And I'm looking forward to having all sorts of fun combining both of these libraries, both of which are linked in the video description down below for you to find out more about them. So if you have any questions about Glass Strings, do stick them in the comments down below. We do read them, and wherever possible, if I have an answer for you, I will endeavour to answer it. So until next time, thanks ever so much for watching. One of those much appreciated for the amazing team that put this together. And if you haven't subscribed yet, as a fellow composer, I would suggest doing so, not least so you can get the best out of these libraries. Loads of tutorials, loads of exciting stuff coming up, loads of opportunities, resources, and fun. Thanks ever so much for watching. See you next time.